Okay, so we are going to get rolling. You guys did a great job of getting me off on tangents today. So the truth is, it's kind of fun to get off on tangents. I mean, how many times have I talked about how to flatten sides in Rhino? Like, it's fun to talk about other things. So I'm glad you guys are asking me, and it's good. I mean, when you guys are students, you're trying to learn about the field and what's going on and what people actually do, and those questions are important. They're important to talk about. So I'm going to go through today, just like I've been doing, as if I started from the very beginning in SketchUp and worked my way through. I am not going to sit here and make you watch me draw all the sides. So I will pick up with the file that I created last class with the sides already, and then we'll go from there when I get to that stage. But I do like to walk through the whole process just to double check that everybody's kind of getting the whole process. So bear with me a little bit. Remember, we started in SketchUp to get our terrain information, and I found in talking to many of you that depending on the location and where you're trying to grab the information, there's better topography and there's worse topography. So hopefully you have one that's it's got reasonable level of detail on it. While waiting for SketchUp to finish its loading errors. There we go. And I will delete the person, and then I'll go into File, and I'm going to go to Geolocation, Add Location. So I know this is repetitive, but it's part of the process. And I've gone ahead and I've looked up Hawaii here. Let's I had good luck on Maui last time, so I'm going to try to pick that. When I zoom in far enough here, I'll click on the Select Region tab, which will give me this region, and I'll click Grab. That then brings in the terrain information in SketchUp. If I want to see it to confirm it looks OK, I can go to the File menu, go to Geolocation, and Show Terrain, and I should get the piece of terrain like that. So now that I have that piece of terrain, I need to save this file as a SketchUp 13. So I'll go to File, Save As, and make sure that I'm going backwards in time. If, by the way, you're using Rhino 6 at home, the newer version, my guess is you could use a newer version of SketchUp when you do the export. Yeah. But this is just, we're stuck in the dark ages of old software, which hopefully next semester will be fixed. Fingers crossed. So I'm going to go ahead and save this into my OneDrive. Into today's folder. And today would be 213. There we go. And it's a SketchUp version 2013, and I'll go ahead and save. And then I can close SketchUp. Now I need to open up Rhino. So I'll open up Rhino. And I'm going to create a new file with large objects inches as my template. And maybe Rhino will decide to load for me at some point. Perfect. There we go. I am in inches, which is good. I'm going to go ahead and bring in that file. I'm not going to insert it as a block instance. I'm going to import it. So I'm going to go to File and then Import. And I'll bring that same SketchUp file in. There was my Hawaii file. Go ahead and say Open. Default options here are just fine for the SketchUp import. And there it is. Now, the flat plane doesn't matter. We don't need that flat plane, so I can go ahead and press the Delete key to get rid of that. And there's my piece of terrain. I need to convert this into a NURBS surface. So I'm going to use the contour command in two directions to do that. So I know this is repetitive, but it's, again, just for practice, and so you guys can see this. You obviously don't have to do it as part of your exercise. You can pick up where we left off. I'm going to work with my layers here. I'm going to take layer 2 and convert that into contour 1. And layer 3 here, I'll convert into contour 2. There we go. I'm going to make contour 1 the active layer. There it is. It's the active layer. And I'll go ahead and initiate the contour command. I'll go to Curve, Curve from Objects, Contour. Or I could type Contour. I'm going to contour this mesh. I'll start in the base point, and I'm going to go off in this direction at about 100 feet. There you go. In reality, I could probably, given the mesh that I have, I could probably do it a little bit wider, and that would be fine as well. Let me repeat this command. Once again, it's contour. I'm going to pick the mesh. I'll hit enter, snap to that point, and I'll go off in this direction. I should have put it on the contour 2 layer, though. So let me double click on contour 2, and we'll do this one more time. I'm going to contour that mesh file, starting at this corner at 100 feet. And there's that set of mesh. I'll then go into the top view. I can turn off the layer 0, which is the terrain. I can get rid of the Google Earth snapshot, Google Earth terrain layers. I don't need them. And I'm going to look at this in the top view and clean up those sides. So we'll take a few of these pieces. Like that, and I'll use the trim command. I'll type trim, otherwise I could go to edit and then trim, either way. I'll hit enter. Oops, sorry. Trim, select cutting objects. There we go, there we go. Now I'll hit enter. And we'll trim off these extra pieces. All right, looks good. I'll hit enter to finish. And now I can create a NURBS surface from all of these curves. So I'll use layer 6 here. We'll call that one terrain. I'll make it active. And I can select all of those curves and go up to my surface curve network, or I could type in network surface, network SRF, into the command line. Do I want to continue? Yes, I do. You guys told me, those of you that are using Rhino 6 now, that network surfaces are limited to 100 curves in each direction. So I'm just pointing that out. If that was the case, I would just do the curve spread out a little bit more in the process. But this will still work for fewer curves. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And we'll let it create its surface. When it's done, there it is. It's a very dense surface. If I were to select it, it's going to show up as a bright yellow object. There it is. So therefore, I need to do a rebuild. So I'll type rebuild, or go into edit, rebuild. My U and V point counts should be 100 and 100. If you want to change these to have them a little bit smoother, you're more than welcome to go 50 by 50 if you'd rather. But I'm going to stick with 100 by 100. I'll say OK. And I now have a surface that's far more reasonable to work with. So let me turn off contour 1 and 2, and I'm left with just my piece of terrain. So in this particular case, you can see that I still have a little bit of those facets. So it might not be bad to rebuild it down a little bit more. I'll say rebuild maybe 75 by 75. See if that smooths it out a little bit more. Yeah, it's a little better. OK, so now I need to start thinking about this as the 3D model that I'm going to end up laser cutting. So this is where that little cheat sheet comes in handy at the bottom of the handout for today. If you go into exercises, we should see it as part of today's exercise at the bottom. No, apparently it was back in this exercise. There we go. There's that chart that I was working on. I'm once again going to work at the 1 to 200 scale. The final model that I'm going to be making is 11 inches by 17 inches. At 11 inches by 17 inches at 1 to 200 scale is going to be 2,200 feet by 3,400 feet. So I need to create a rectangle that is at 2,200 feet, comma, 3,400 feet. and I'll hit enter. And there's my rectangle. That represents the size of the model that I'm ultimately going to make. I'll move this over to the part of the terrain that I want to use. Let me go a little bit over there, just a little bit more like that. Perfect. Then I'll switch into the top view and project that curve onto my surface. I'll do that using the curve from objects project command. Alternatively, I could type in project into the command line. Either way. It's asking me to select the curves to project. That would be my curve. I'll hit enter. Sorry. Then I'll select the surfaces. There's my surface. And I'll go ahead and press enter again. The resulting curve wraps around my piece of terrain the way I want it to. At this point, I can use the trim command, edit, trim, or I could type trim to get rid of the extra bit of surface that's around my model. This then is the final, This then is that final piece of surface that I'm going to make into my model. It's the final piece of terrain. So it's scaled down correctly, or excuse me, it's not scaled down correctly, but it's cut to the right size. And now it's a matter of working out where the steps are going to be on the side. So first thing I need to do is slice this up vertically in the dimension of the material that I'm going to make the physical model out of. So I'm suggesting to all of you that you use the bookstore cardboard, which is 5/32 of an inch thick and relatively inexpensive. So I'm going to peg my contours at that 5/32 of an inch. So at 5/32 of an inch, at my 1 to 200 scale, if I brought this chart back up here, there's my 1 to 200. I come across here until I meet up with the 5/32 of an inch, and I get 31.250 feet as my contour. So I'll come back to this piece. I'll type the contour again, or I'll go to curve from objects, contour, either way. Contour base point is going to be one of these corners here. I don't want it going off in the X direction or the Y direction this time. I want it going up in the Z. So I'll move out of perspective view and into one of the side views here. It is, such that I can go straight up and down. There it is, going straight up and down. And my distance between contours is going to be 31.25 feet. And I'll hit enter. That then slices up this piece of terrain into the pieces that I want for my final model. So I'm going to move those objects that I just created onto a new layer. We'll put them onto layer 7 here. And I'm going to turn off the terrain so that all I have left is these lines. So last class we talked about the two different methods for creating the stepping sides. You can use either one. Some of you were very successful with the C-plane, which is great. If you don't, you'll do it the other way, which is using little points. So let me go ahead and illustrate both ways. First one that I'm going to do is I'm going to click, instead of left clicking for a single point, I'm going to right click on the point button to get multiple points. And I'll put a point at each end of these lines, making sure that I'm snapping to the actual end of each line. There it is. I've got my points. I'll hit enter to finish. Now I'm going to take all of those points by selecting them, but not that little curve at the end. And I'm going to use rotate 3D to fold them flat down into the ground plane. So I'll go back to my transform, rotate 3D. I'll start at that point right there. We'll go off in the, I guess this is the X direction right now. We'll go straight up and down, and we'll fold those flat. Now that they're flat, I can start working on creating the sides. Let me create a new layer for sides. I'll make it active. And now I can start with my polyline tool on the first point And we're going to snap to perpendicular on each of these. And we'll draw up my lines. Like that. I'm not going to finish, but you guys get the idea. When I'm done, I will select all of those again. And I'll use the rotate 3D command once more. So I'll go up to transform, rotate 3D, starting with that same base point. We'll go off along the x-axis. We'll take it from being flat and fold it back up so it matches up with the sides. Once it's back up in this space, we should be able to see it in the side views, and it should look like a perfect set of steps. If you have lines that are sloping or not perfectly right-angled, something went wrong during the process, and you'll probably need to do it again. In some rare cases, there'll be an error, in which case you can explode the line and fix it. So before you guys move on to create the final sides, I'm going to come around and try to check on your corners and your lines to make sure that they look good before you move on. So if I wasn't doing the points method, I would be doing the C-plane method. So I'll do the C-plane method on this front edge here. By default, my C-plane is set in world top when I'm in the perspective view. It's represented by my grid. I'm going to make my grid a little bit larger so that you can see it, though you don't have to do this. I'll right-click on Grid Snap and go to Settings. And I'm going to change my grid line count to be 2,000. And I'm going to say minor grid lines every 12 inches. So I have 2,000 and I have 12. And I'll go ahead and say OK. Just makes my overall grid a little bit bigger, a little easier for you guys to see. So there it is. Now that I have that shown, I'm going to go ahead and change my C-plane. I'll go to the little triangle next to perspective. I'll go to Set C-plane 3 points. I'll come over to the first point on my line right there. It's going to ask me for the x-axis direction. I want to go off. I'm not snapping to any of these lines. I'm just going off in space. I do have ortho on, so it's a perfectly straight line. I'll click. It's a single left click. Next thing, it says C-plane orientation. I need this not to go out, but to go straight up. So I'll switch to one of my side views. There we go. I'm in the front view. I'm going straight up. I will click one more time, and it reorients that C-plane to be correct. Once I have that C-plane set up correctly, if something went wrong, remember, go back to world top first, and then go back and try it again. So world top is your savior. Just go back to that when in doubt. So once I'm up in that direction, I can go ahead and start drawing from this first point and work my way up the side. Like so.
How do I change the size again?
Of the grid?
Of the C-plane? Yeah.
When you would go right-click on Grid Snap, go to Settings. And then you want your grid line count to be 2,000 and your minor grid lines to be every 12 inches. So once I'm done with these steps, I'd go back to my C-plane being in world top. So I'll go to Set C-plane, and we'll go back to world top to reset everything back to the defaults. So I asked you last class, yeah, RJ?
You could technically do one C-plane and then do it for both.
For both sides. True, you can. So when I had the C-plane vertically here, I could technically be drawing along this back set. I find that you sometimes can get out of whack because your drawing plane, even though it's in the same, it's parallel to where you're trying to draw, it's not actually in the same plane that you're trying to draw. So you're less likely to have errors if you actually move the C-plane.
Okay.
You can technically get away with it. It's kind of like when you draw like on a floor plan, and you're trying to draw up above the floor plan, and sometimes it snaps down to being on the ground when you didn't want it to, and you get a sloping line. The same thing can happen if you don't move the C-plane. So it's better practice to move the C-plane. So I asked you last class to go ahead and finish the sides. I think I finished the sides in that drawing. So let me go ahead and open that one. Oh, apparently not quite done. Let me go ahead and quickly finish these sides, and then we'll go from there. I apologize for that. I thought I had finished it. So as I'm going through this, remember when we get to a set of contour lines where they don't drop down, they would be going on the bottom edge, they'd be going down your contour distance. So here's an example. This corner has a line that goes across. If I think about this corner, though, this line should be at the top of a step, and there should be one more step that goes down and then over before it meets on that particular corner. So I'm going to go ahead and try to resolve that corner right now. I'll start with a line right there at this last point. I know the distance down because I've been specifying what my contour height is, which is 31.25 feet. Yours may or may not be 31.25 feet. Do whatever you chose on your chart. I'll hit enter. That way I'm going down the correct amount. Then I'll draw a line that's just off in space. It goes beyond everything. At that point, I want to come back and start on this line, but my C-plane isn't in the correct plane anymore. So this is a good time to go ahead and reset my C-plane. I'll go to Set C-plane, World Top. I'll go back to Set C-plane, 3 points. And I'll move my C-plane to be on that side. Now I can go down the same 31.25 feet and then off in space. If I did this correctly, those two lines will intersect, and I'll be able to use a trim to trim them. So I'll go ahead and type trim those two objects. I'll hit enter, and I'll get rid of those two pieces. So it's a good way of double checking to make sure your corners stacked up correctly. So I'm going to reset that C-plane so that I can go across the back here. So I'll go back to Set C-plane, World Top. Then I'll go back to Set C-plane, 3 points. Oops. Set C-plane, 3 points, not to object. We'll start right there. We're going to go off in space over here. And we'll have that straight up and down. There it is. OK, so now I'm in that C-plane for the back. And I need to go ahead and start drawing this one. So we'll start from that first point right there. A lot of these is the visualization of knowing what's happening. So this needs to go down to meet up with this point. This one's going to go down again to meet up with that point. So now, this line here, I go straight across to hit that point. So this, I actually have to go down, over, and then back up, because this is like a little valley in the hill. So I'll go 31.25 feet down. I'll go over till I meet to that point right there, and then I'll come back up. So it's only when you reach where two contours are even across the side, in which case you're going down and then across. Now as I come over here, we can work my way back up. So there I am, working my way back up.
That's if there's one that's just lower, right?
That's if there's two parallel and you're going down. So I'm about to get to one where I'm going up. So I've just gotten to this point. And at this point, this contour here comes around and connects to that point. But it's at the top of the hill, not at the bottom of the hill. So since it's at the top of the hill, and I've already made my step up to that contour, I just go straight across there. So if it's at the bottom of the hill, you're going down your contour amount. If it's at the top of the hill, you can go straight across. In which case, we'll start coming back down this side there, there. Now, I got to this last point, and I have to deal with how these corners meet up. So once again, I'm going to go down by my contour amount, 31.25 feet. It should be going straight down. And then I'll go straight off into space here. Then I can come back to this point, and it looks like I went up and then I kind of stopped it halfway. This needs to be longer. If I went to draw on that, it's still going to let me draw it, I believe. Yeah, there we go. And I'll hit enter. So those two should now allow me to trim. So I'll go ahead and type trim. And I'll get rid of that piece and that piece.
And what do you do about that little guy?
So that corner, so this goes up and to the corner and then back and then up to the next step. So the corner should be level, unless your contour meets exactly in the corner. But not everybody's is going to do that. So let me come back to this corner. I've got another problem here. This one is like at the top of the hill, like the example that was at the top of the hill. So this one's going to go from this step there, straight out. And it's going to go from that point there, straight out. It's not going to let me draw that because my C-plane is forcing me up and down. So I can use my perpendicular snap to come over and meet that line. In which case, we can select those two, trim, and I can trim that out. So now that corner is meeting up. So I've done 3 of the 4 corners. Come over to this last corner here. There it is. So the first one needs to go off in space that way. This one is going to go down by 31.25 feet. There it is. And it needs to come over to meet. I can't do it other than snapping because of my C-plane. So I'm going to snap to perpendicular, and then I can go ahead and trim that piece. So let me reset my C-plane to world top. And now as I start to look around my model, we can see that, okay, that corner is right. This goes down. This goes straight across. This one here was a mistake, because remember it had just a little bit there and I got rid of it. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line that goes straight across there and there. I could use that line as a trim to get rid of that part. The alternative would be to take this whole line, explode. The problem with explode is it made all individual line segments. So what I'll do is I'll hold down Control and deselect there and there. Without having deselected the rest of this, I can then type join, and these pieces will end up staying together. It's just a little bit of an extra trick. I can then delete these, and I can start joining all of this together. Ultimately, what I'm looking for is to have one line that goes from the corner all the way to the next corner. So I'll take all of those and I'll join them together. Perfect. Now this line here, we'll take all of those plus this and we'll join that together. We'll take this line, plus that line, goes all the way to the corner, and we'll join. We'll take this, plus that little bit from the corner, and we'll join. So now I should have just 4 lines of steps that run around each side of my object. I also want all of these to be on their own sides layer. So you could do separate sides if you wanted to. I'm going to make sure that they're all on just the one sides layer. That's fine. I can turn off the points to make them go away. And there we are. So once I've gotten this part put together, it's time to start actually figuring out how we're going to make this into the laser cut file. So I'm going to take it to the next step, and I'll start slowing down my process a little bit because you guys will be having to do this part today in all likelihood. So when I start thinking about this, each one of these sides needs to be a side to support my contours. So I'll find whichever side is the lowest. So it looks like this point here is my lowest point of all the points. So I'm going to start there with a polyline right there at the corner. Now I want it to go down at least one contour, so 31.25 feet. It could go down a little bit more, that would be okay. But my C-plane isn't set so that it can go down. I can, however, draw in one of the side views. So I could use the front view here, and I could go down. It can be an arbitrary amount, or you could type in something, I'll say maybe 100 feet. So it goes down a little bit. It should be at least one contour. So in my case, it should be at least 31.25 feet. I did 100, so it has a little bit more base underneath it. So once I've done that, I'll draw a line that goes straight across and is longer than my terrain, and I'll hit enter. So I have this line drawn that goes down and over. I'm going to draw another line that goes from this point here down, and I'll use perpendicular snap to have it come straight down to that line. I can then trim that piece off. And if I look at this plus that, I've now created the first side that's going to support my model. So once I've created that, I'll go ahead and type join, and it becomes one closed curve. It's a good sign. So now I need to start making the rest of the sides. So once again, I'll start with the polyline tool. I'll come to this next corner. There it is right there. I'll go down. I'll make the height match at this corner, and I'll come straight across. Then I'll go to this upper corner, snap to it, come straight down to perpendicular. There it is, and hit enter. Now I can use this line to trim that piece. If I hold down Shift, I can select that piece plus this piece right there, and I can join those together. So you can see how this is starting to become that model that I showed you last class. Same thing, we'll work from this corner right here. We'll go down, down to there, over. From this corner down to perpendicular, enter. Trim to get rid of that piece of the line, enter to finish. And I'll select this plus that, and join, and I have that as a closed curve. So each side is becoming a closed curve. Last piece here, this one's pretty easy. I'll go down, over, and back up. I'll select that curve, plus my steps, and type join. So I have a complete side on all four of the sides, which is what I'm after. So now I have to start conceiving of this as actually being cut on the laser cutter. So right now they're in 3 dimensions. I need to fold them all flat. So I'm going to use my rotate 3D command. I'll go to transform, rotate 3D. My start of the rotation axis will be along the bottom here. My end will be the other end of this side, and we'll go from being straight up and down to being flat. I'll do this for each side. So we'll repeat that rotation. I'll go to transform, rotate 3D, and we'll fold that side flat. It doesn't matter whether you fold them in or fold them out. Logically, it seems like people fold them out. You just have to make sure they're all the same. Don't fold 2 of them in and 2 of them out. That'll get you screwed up. So we'll repeat, rotate 3D, there to there, straight up, and we'll fold that one down. This last piece, rotate 3D, there to there, straight up and down, we'll fold it down flat. Oop, so I made a mistake. Didn't fold the way I wanted to. We'll escape that one, and we'll do that rotate 3D one more time. Snap to snap, there, and we'll fold it flat. So I've got the 4 sides now ready to be laser cut. The only thing that I don't have yet is I haven't assigned them their own layer, and they don't have the correct color on them. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new layer. I'll call that brand new layer laser cut. And I'm going to create 2 sublayers. I'm going to create a laser cut cut and a laser cut engrave. Now, in order for the laser cut to register these lines correctly, we need to change the colors of the lines. So the cut lines, instead of being black, I'm going to change them to be red. If you just pick the default Rhino red here, it's perfect. It's a 255 red, which is what we need. So I'll go ahead and say OK. My engrave layer, I'm going to change and have that one be in blue, just the plain blue, and it's a 255 blue. So we're good. So I have a cut layer, and I have an engrave layer. These 4 sides are ultimately all going to be cut. So I'll take those 4 sides, and I'll put them on the cut layer. I'll right-click and say Change Object Layer, and they'll all turn red. Those are my cut objects so far. Make sense? OK, so those are ready to be cut. Now I get to my lines. The lines right now are in 3D. I need them all flat. Remember that first day we did the projection? We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a new layer for that projection, just for cleanliness purposes. And I'm going to call that layer Project. I'll make it active. And all I need is a rectangle that is larger than my contours. I'll look in the top view here, and I'm going to do Project. It's also under Curve, Curve from Objects, Project. It says Select Curves and Points to Project. It's going to be all of the contours right there. I'll press Enter. Then it's going to say Select Surfaces. I'm going to select that big rectangle that I just created, and I'll hit Enter. Remember, I have to do all of this in the top view. Kristen, do you have a question?
Is it an issue if the surface is 12 by 17 on the exact size that's supposed to be?
I don't quite understand.
You said to make the surface underneath the contours larger than contours. Is it a problem if it's 11 by 17, which is pretty much exactly the size of the contours?
No, it's fine. It could be like that. You just want to make sure that it's big enough so that when you do the projection. To me, it's easier to just do a big rectangle. When I'm done, I'll delete that surface because I don't need it anymore. And I'm also going to turn off my side steps here so that they're not, well, I hope they're not confusing us. How convenient. Let me back up. Somehow my steps didn't get put on the correct layer. OK, now they're on the correct layer. Sorry about that. In the top view, project again. There's my contours. I'll project them onto this surface. There we go. Now I can turn off the ones that are in 3D and delete the extras. So now I have all of these contours that have been cut out. Now the tricky part here is we have to think about how this is going to end up gluing together long term. If I were to take all of these lines and just convert them all to being cut out lines, I'd get every one of the contours, but I'd have no surface to rest the contours on top of each other. So we're actually going to make 2 versions of all of these contours. And I'm going to switch now into just working in the top view, because the 3D view isn't helping me. Everything's flat now anyway. So let me take all of these contours, and I'm going to go ahead and move them just over here so that we're not confused by these other pieces. And I'm going to take a second. I'm going to take all of these, and I'm going to copy them. So I'll type copy, and I'll move the copy next door. So I have 2 sets of the lines. They're exactly the same to start. What I want to do is I'll take all of the lines on this side, and I'll right click and I'll put them on the cut layer. So I'll go to change object layer. They're all going to be on the cut layer. From here though, I need to start selecting every other line. So if I start at this line, I'll hold down shift and I'll select that line, and this line, and this line, and this line, and work my way up. Okay. When you get to the hills, sometimes they split and you have to work your way up each side of the hill. Here I've got some going down. That would be one. There we go. So I have all of those selected, and I'm going to right click and put them on the engrave layer. So I'll right click and say change object layer, and they're on the engrave layer. So I have all of them alternating. So when this cuts out, it's going to cut the red line, it's going to leave a little trace line for the blue line, then it's going to cut this red line. So it's giving me two contours. On this set of contours, I'm going to do the same thing except the opposite. So I'll select all of these objects. I'll right click and put them on the engrave or on the cut layer once again. Change object layer. There we go. I started by selecting this line on this side and converting it to the engrave. Instead, I'll select this line, so it's the opposite. And I'll work my way back up. So I'll hold down shift and we'll start going back up. If you get lost as to which lines you're picking, sometimes you have to go back and look at the 3D view to see which ones. And that one there. So I've selected them. I'll right click on the engrave layer and say change object layer. And there we go. So they should be the same, but inverse the colors. Which means that when I go to cut these pieces out, and I have them side by side and build the model, I basically take one from one pile, take one from the next pile, and glue it on top. So I'm going to shuffle. It's like shuffling a deck of cards. You take one from one pile, one from the other pile, and you blend them together.
You have to cut the edges too.
So that's the last piece, is I haven't done the edges yet.
Instead of doing two like that, could you also just reverse like what's cut and what's engraved when you're using the laser cutter?
Yes, but you'd have to run two different jobs. But yeah, you probably could. Either way.
This is what makes it hollow.
So this is why it's ultimately going to be hollow. So we have these two versions that are going to shuffle together. If it doesn't make sense, the whole shuffling part, we'll get there. Trust me for now that this is what they should look like. Okay? So last thing is I need to cut out all the way around each of these. So I'll do a rectangle. And I'm going to use my smart tracking to find the actual corner. So there's the actual corner there. That's the actual corner there. This line that goes all the way around the outside needs to be on the cut layer. So I'll change object layer. Now it's on the cut layer. Same thing, rectangle. There it is. And I will right click, change object layer, and it's now on the cut layer as well. So I have each of these ready to be cut out. I have all four of my sides ready to be cut out. This is a good time to go ahead and do save, so I'll go to File, Save. So now I need to actually prep these files to be laser cut. They're currently still 3,400 feet by 2,400 feet. So it's time to do that whole scale down thing. So I'm going to start and select all of my objects. I'm going to type scale or go up to transform scale. It is a regular scale or a scale 3D. So we're scaling everything. It says origin point. I'll pick one point here on one of the rectangles. I know that this needs to be 17 inches and this needs to be 11 inches. So all I have to do is go from that point to this point and say my new distance here should be 11 inches. And I'll hit enter. It disappears. Oh no. That's because it's really, really small. We went from 2,400 feet to 11 inches. So it's really tiny. So before you deselect anything, type Z for zoom, followed by S for selected, and you'll see it again. So these are now set to the correct size to go be laser cut. They're scaled down correctly. We could confirm that everything's correct. I could do a distance command, and I could do it in inches. Let me see if you do it in fractional inches. And I could say from there to there, it's saying it's 1/4 of an inch. It's 5/32. It's rounding. OK, so it is all in the correct size. Next thing I need is I need 2 or 3 laser cut beds to give me the size of the laser cut. The laser cutter is 12 by 24, so I'm going to say at 24, comma 12, and hit enter. That gives me the size of the laser cutter bed. I'll go ahead and copy that a couple times. It's going to take you probably at least 3, maybe 4, depending on how they fit. If you're really lucky, it'll fit on 2, and you only have to buy 1 sheet of cardboard. If not, share with your neighbor, because you probably need 3. OK, so now I need to arrange all of these pieces onto these laser cut beds. I am going to take the laser cut beds and put them on the laser cut layer. So let me go ahead and change objects layer. And they don't need to be cut out because that's the bed size. So they can be left black. That's fine. So let me take this first one here. I'm going to rotate it so that it's horizontal. I'll move it, and we'll stick it over here. You don't want it to be perfectly in the corners. You want to have a little space around your work. So my first one is there. I'll rotate this one. It's just a regular rotate. And I'll move this there's my second one. Now I need each of these sides to fit. So I could take all of these and rotate them again. And I'll take this first one and we'll move it. It doesn't matter the order in which they appear on this page. The only thing that matters is you don't flip them over. So no mirroring. Some people get creative and end up putting, their names on them or whatever. You can do that, but you can also just write it on with a marker. That's fine. So make sure that none of the pieces overlap. So if you need a little extra space, give yourself a little bit of extra space. And so it looks like it took me 3 pieces to make this work. Reasonable. So when I go to the bookstore, I'm going to need to buy 2 sheets because out of each sheet of cardboard, you can get 2 of the laser cuts. Okay? So I would need 2 sheets from the bookstore. It's like $6. But I only need 3 pieces out of it, and I could get 4. So Barb and I could get together, and she could borrow one of my extra pieces. That make sense? Right? And you could buy me a coffee or something like that. Right? It would work. Okay? So in this context, the last piece of the puzzle is we need to bring this into an AutoCAD file. So I'm going to select just the pieces that I want to ultimately export, just those pieces. I'm going to move them so that this corner is down at 0, 0. So I'll go 0, 0, 0. I'm going to zoom selected so that they're down at the origin. Just going to make the export clean. And I'll go to File, Export Selected. And I'm going to change from a Rhino file to an AutoCAD file. So it needs to be an AutoCAD DWG file. And let me move into today's folder here. And we are in the spring semester. There we go. And I'll go ahead and click Save. It will then pop up my DWG export options. 2004 polylines would be great. So pick that, and I'll go ahead and say OK. When I'm done, it's now written the AutoCAD file. This class doesn't require any AutoCAD. However, Laser cutting just needs a little tiny bit of AutoCAD. So I'm going to show you how to prep the file in AutoCAD because there's one more thing you need to do. You can do it on the laser cutter right before you have to go do your cut. But if you do it ahead of time, then you don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to go ahead and find that file that I just saved. Oops. It would help if I was in the right class here. So there it is. If I double click on it, it should open AutoCAD. When you open a file that came from Rhino in AutoCAD, it's always going to throw this warning. Go ahead and just continue to open the AutoCAD file. And there they are. They showed up nicely, ready for me to AutoCAD. So the only thing that you need to change in AutoCAD that you can't set in Rhino is the line weights for laser cutting. So your work is all conveniently on layers. So all we have to do is click this Layer Properties button right here at the top. And under line weight, they're all currently default. Go ahead and change them all to 0.00 millimeters. So I'll change the first one, and you just do it by clicking on the line weight and pressing 0.00. And there they are. Once you have all of them at 0.00, you can save your file one more time, and that file's ready to laser cut. So if you get to the point today where you have your laser cut file ready, you have your AutoCAD file, this is what's the first submission in your assignment 202 is required to be. So you need to give me your AutoCAD file as part of 202. So if you finish it today, you can actually turn in the first part of assignment 202 today. Okay? I forget, I'd have to look at the due dates to make sure exactly when it's due, but you should turn it in. That also means that you're ready to go schedule a time to go laser cut. I will do a demonstration for you in the next couple class days about how to glue it all together. So you'll still get the experience of how to glue it together, and I'll show you that part of it. But I'll have to run over and cut an example and whatever. It is on you, it is your responsibility to figure out a time to go laser cut it and to glue it together. So you won't have time in class to do those two pieces. Okay, so that's part of you. All the lab techs that work over there should know how to cut cardboard. Shouldn't be an issue. This is pretty easy. If you've never worked with a laser cutter before, hang out with the person, the lab tech, and learn how to use it because it'll save you a lot down the road if you know how to do these kinds of things. Okay? It's pretty easy over there. They'll have whatever the optimal settings are. And if you really need some further instruction, I can go over and I can help you do it as well. You do also need to make a separate post from your exercise 213 and your assignment. So if you decide today you're done with your AutoCAD file and you want to turn in that first part of the assignment 202, make a separate post with your AutoCAD file. So I need to see both. I need to see the exercise and I need to see the assignment. Does that make sense? So there'll be two different posts, even if it's the same file. I need two posts, one for each. Okay? You can, when you get your files ready in Rhino, when they look like this, you can do a screen capture to get your JPEG for your featured image as part of it, because you're going to be uploading the AutoCAD file, but you can also do a screen capture of this, and I'll see it with the red and blue lines.
That would be for the which part?
When you go to post, you'll need the JPEG.
The assignment or post the exercise?
For both.
Oh, for both.
You're going to need a JPEG in order to post.
Just do them both.
Yeah. So it's the same. Yeah. Yeah, I will. You could do it in Illustrator, though we're going to do the cutting in AutoCAD in all likelihood. Technically, you can cut in Illustrator. The problem with cutting in Illustrator is the artboard size needs to be 24 by 24 instead of 12 by 24. So if you feel more comfortable in Illustrator, you absolutely can do it that way. You just have to set your artboard correct, and then you can open Illustrator over there and cut from that. There's a subtle difference. So to me, AutoCAD's a little bit easier, so I usually pick AutoCAD. But it's up to you. Any other big questions? No? Okay, then I'll come around. Let me save the recording, and then we'll go from there.